It's time to check in on the NFC North post-draft. NFC North draft grades. 2 new rookie quarterbacks franchise-altering drafts in the NFC. Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we would appreciate it, and we would love it, and we would love you forever if you just hit that subscribe button on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Here we go. NFC North. This is a really fun one. It's a fun division. They've got new quarterbacks. I think there were big swings in this draft. There were trades around, and we're going to go alphabetical as we have been in our division by division, team by team draft grades, Matt. And that brings us to the team with the number one pick in this draft, the Chicago Bears. 2 really big back-to-back drafts that are going to alter the future of this organization forever, for good or bad. Everyone's going to remember the 2023 draft because of what that allowed them to do in the 2024 draft. Caleb Williams, 1.1, the number one pick in this draft. Is he generational? Rome Odunze to follow him up, and then a very interesting class here to follow. Not a lot of picks. It's a small class, but could be the most impactful in this entire draft with only 5 selections. Caleb Williams and wide receiver Rome Odunze out of Washington in round 1. And then Kieran Amagaji, Yale offensive tackle in round 3, coming back with Torrey Taylor, a punter out of Iowa in round 4. And then Austin Booker, Kansas edge rusher in round 5. That is it. That is the Chicago Bears draft class. And even when you consider the punter in round 4, this is a guy that could play for your franchise for 15 years. Matt, if you got, and look, people laugh. It's like, this is the Bears, and they're last place every time, and you're going to draft a punter. But, I mean, he might, that's field position. He can play for your team for 15 years in the 4th round, key special teams player. And if you got a starting left tackle in Kieran Amagaji, who has the physical attributes to be that in the NFL, and a dynamic quarterback wide receiver combo, a true wide receiver 1, a true quarterback 1, this could be one of the greatest drafts of all time.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. I mean, I think this is the only division that had 2 first-round quarterbacks. So this is going to be a fun show, led off by the first overall pick, who I do think is transcendence, a big word, but is a phenomenal prospect. And frankly, I firmly believe Odunze would be a top 5 pick 9 out of 10 drafts. So you get a phenomenal value with the 9th overall player as well. Was it even a need? Who cares? It doesn't matter to me at all. He's a great player. Let these 2 grow together and all that.
And sometimes I want to, because this is important. Sometimes the draft falls in a way that makes things easy for you.
Yeah.
Nobody in the world would have screwed up these 2 picks.
Exactly.
These were the only guys to pick in each spot for the Chicago Bears here at 1 and 9. But they put themselves in the position to be allowed to do this, which did take some skill and some maneuvering and some moves by this front office to get them there. So you can't just say, whatever, that was the easiest picks because of where they were drafting. Well, they were drafting in a certain spot. Well, pick 9 because they were bad. But pick number 1 because of the moves they did in 2023, which is why that draft was so important. And we'll always come back to the 2024 draft, but the 2023 draft is the one that set him up for Ryan Poles.
And they didn't do the stupid thing and keep Fields and draft Harrison. And remember when that was even a conversation? I mean, like, this was a no-brainer move. And they were a little fortunate that Penix goes 8 and somebody didn't trade up to 8 and grab the Odunze, because this could have looked a lot different. This could have been Byron Murphy, or trade down. You end up with 8 picks or something. Who knows? But I mean, they like you said, we would have done the exact same thing. I think all of our listeners would have done just about the exact same thing. They were easy picks, and I'm not going to ding them for that when we talk grades. punter could have been the 6th round, not the 4th, to be honest. But I mean,
I'm never going to be like, hey, great pick, punter or a kicker, inside the first 5 rounds of a draft. But he was the best punter in the class. He's one of the better punters we've seen in a while.
Yeah,
and he's going to be a lot more valuable than some other guys who were drafted in the 4th round. If he's
I'm sure. I mean, some of those guys have busted that have been kickers and punters in the mid rounds. Whatever. I'm not going to condemn it too much. I do love the Yale tackle where they got him because he doesn't have to play right now. Their tackles, their line is good, but I don't love it. So reinforcements there certainly could help. Small things just about the team as a whole. I do think they're a defensive lineman away, an impact defensive lineman away from really having a top tier defense, but their defense played really, really well last year down the stretch. So I don't want people to forget that. And one small thing is, if I were team building and drafted Caleb Williams, I probably would have had a sage old veteran quarterback in place, not Teabag as my direct, backup. It's a weird quarterback room.
I mean, come on. The disrespect of Tyler Badgett is immense from Matt Williamson here. He's a veteran now. He's the old head.
Been around the block.
Yeah. Caleb Williams is going to play. You have a coaching staff in place to help him out. I go back and forth on that. I think it really is important sometimes to have somebody who can show you rather than tell you. And so having that veteran quarterback is important. I would like that as well. They could still do that. There are some quarterbacks out there. And
even if he just gets hurt, have somebody better to come off the bench. I mean, even if they're not a mentor, I just don't love the backup quarterback. I don't love the room besides Williams.
I think it's probably difficult for them to get a quarterback in at a good price that because they know they're not going to play. And I think they like Badgett enough to be. I think he's the perfect backup. It's just he's not a 10-year veteran.
Mm-hmm. I'm nitpicking. I mean, there's only 5 picks in this draft. One was a punter, one was first overall that everyone in the world would have taken. Adunze's an easy pick too. So
Kieran Amegaji could be someone who never plays football, right? Like he could be anything. It was supremely low floor, supremely high ceiling. Austin Booker is kind of similar. You talked about their defensive line, in the 5th round.
I like that pick.
If you said they got 5 starters out of 5 picks here, and we look back at 3 years, that's absolutely possible. That's why this could be the A+ of A+ drafts. They swung for the fences, not only at pick number 1, they had to there, but in the 3rd round with Amegaji and in the 5th round with Booker. And then they made sure they got someone who's going to contribute in the round 4 pick. So maybe that's why they're like, all right, look, we're going crazy here in this draft. Let's take a punter here. We know we're going to have somebody who's going to be on the field in a couple of years for it. But I love it. And Amegaji in the 3rd round was the right place. I've seen it's hard to know. Like if he worked out, he might have gone pick 32, right?
I say maybe he goes to the Packers instead of the Arizona kid, possible. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like that's the talent. This guy has everything you think a left tackle would need in the NFL. He just was hurt and didn't have a chance to play in the Senior Bowl. Didn't have a chance to play didn't have a chance to work out and really solidify that draft stock for teams. So it's really up in the air what you're going to get with him. And clearly he's a smart guy, went to Yale, but just the tape and dominating that competition's not enough. But he might be that guy. And so I love this draft for the Bears. I'm going to give him an A- because I think of what this draft could be. Could be an A+. And it could be a huge F if Caleb Williams doesn't become a guy.
Of course. I mean, everything will hinge on that, but it's the one thing we didn't mention is it's a great environment for a first overall pick to go to. I mean, this isn't Manning going to the Colts or Aikman going to Dallas where, or most cases where it's just miserable surroundings and you're the worst team in the league. I mean, and I don't know, Keenan Allen will be here next year. So Adunze has a very, easy path. I'm going to give it an A. I thought you were going to go A+ on this one. I'm giving it an A.
I'll go A- just because, I mean, A+ is hard. That's me like they moved around to get those guys. They still, it was still a little too easy for them, as far as this draft goes. So we'll go A- on that. So Caleb Williams, obviously, there's a lot of questions about who he is and how he operates. And I think his teammates love him. He does seem to have a lot, like he feeds off vibes. He's a vibes guy, it feels like, right? And you have to be a nerd and a grinder at quarterback in the NFL. Is he that? then he'll be a star because he's got the ability to just put the ball where he wants to. And when he sees it, he absolutely lets it fly. And I love how quickly he gets the ball, which is the biggest contrast you'll see from Justin Fields to Caleb Williams. Is when he sees it, the ball's out instantly and exactly where he wants to put it.
Processing speed. Yeah.
He goes a little hero ball, and that's what I'm talking about with the vibes. If he's just like, I'm good and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make plays all the time, that's not going to be enough in the NFL. So that's where it could go wrong with Caleb Williams. But I think some of the stuff off the field and how he operates is a little overblown. So I think his teammates like him, and he's a better leader than he's getting credit for, I think, at USC. So we'll see how that ends up going there. And obviously Rome Odunze and both those quarterback wide receivers have a perfect opportunity and a perfect landing spot to become good. And you laid it out there with Rome Odunze because, doesn't have to be more than a number 3 in year 1. And then by year 2, now guess what? Maybe you're even wide receiver 1 and you're rolling in that offense.
So maybe learn a trick of the trade from Keenan Allen in the meantime,
And then you might get a franchise left tackle on top of it, which would be crazy if a Megaji hits in this class. So that's
maybe a franchise punter too.
Yeah,
I know you're psyched about the punter.
Field position's important. I certainly wouldn't have taken a 4th round punter, but the Bears did, and a safe pick to go with some of the high upside day 3 stuff.
I like it.
Next, the Detroit Lions. This is a fun division to follow now and in the future. Are the Lions ready to be kings of not only the North, but the entire NFC? Packers trying to make that leap, and the Vikings obviously added their own quarterback to the mix. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. It is so important. I can't stress it enough. Do not let the small thing become a big thing in your life. And sometimes you just need that weekly check-in with a therapist. It can help so much to have that weekly check-in to make sure you are hitting all the points you want to in your life to achieve those goals and get where you want to be. And therapy can be different for everyone. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is suited for you. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your specific schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The Detroit Lions going DB heavy, and obviously that was the big need for them coming into the offseason, Matt. And so you knew that they would be looking at corners, and they were, consistently being mocked a cornerback at pick 29. And they said, you know what? We're not going to sit at 29 and hope a guy gets to us. We're going to move up and get Terrion Arnold, who some people thought was the best corner in this class at pick number 24. Trading up with the Dallas Cowboys there to get the Alabama corner. Came back in round 2 and said, we're not done at corner. We're going Ennis Rakestraw at the end of round 2, corner out of Missouri. Giovanni Manu, an offensive tackle out of British Columbia. You got a safety, Sione Vaki, who's kind of like a hybrid safety running back.
Yeah. They announced him as a running back. I don't know what to do. What he's
did they? Okay.
Yeah.
In Utah, he shows flashes as a running back. He's a great athlete. He's just sort of a and I love this. Late round 4, day 3. He's a moldable ball of clay. Probably be a special teams player with some offense, defense, versatility. Will he be a safety? Will he be a running back? I don't know, but he's an athlete, and so interesting player there. Sione Vaki out of Utah. Mekhi Wingo is maybe my favorite pick in this entire draft. Like, this guy can rush the passer, and 6th rounder. You're talking about just a rotational interior, undersized 3 technique, penetrating pass rusher, defensive tackle out of LSU. Love that pick. And then Christian Mahogany, a guard out of Boston College in round 6. What is your grade for this Detroit Lions draft?
I don't know if I'm just in a good mood or in the, but I like both these drafts quite a bit, and really aggressive organization, head coach on the field, off the field. And they had an aggressive draft, go get 2 corners. Let's just end this problem right now. Guys that play hard and have some inside-outside versatility to him as well. I mean, I didn't watch any of Manu at British Columbia, but apparently he's a big athletic ball of clay, and Decker's not going to be there forever. He doesn't have to play anytime soon on that line, which I think might be the best in the league now. Mahogany was one of my favorites as well. I guess he has some sort of injury designation, so that's why he fell. Mingo or Wingo as well. I mean, you pair him with DJ Reader with what they already had. They couldn't be any more different, but a situational guy. Vakai is going to help on special teams at a minimum. He's probably your returner with the new kickoff rules and maybe help on both sides of the ball. I adore it, to be honest with you. I think this was another, I'm going to give it an A-, for really attacking needs, getting their type of guys. If I had any complaint in a wide receiver heavy draft, I wouldn't have minded somebody else in the mix. I mean, maybe that's a ringing endorsement that they're confident in Jameson Williams. I don't know, but other than St. Brown, their receiving rooms, so.
When you have a weakness and you need to attack it, do it twice. And I love that theory in the draft. And Ennis Rakestraw was a player that I saw some people say, oh, maybe even a late first round guy. I didn't see that on tape, but I love the fits and how they can play. Rakestraw actually reminded myself and Eric Crocker when we did a little deep dive on him, thinking he could be a prospect for the Niners, who actually did take a corner a couple picks later. The 49ers did. And so Rakestraw might have been one of those guys. And he's reminded us both of a former Niner who's currently a Lion in Emmanuel Mosley, like a slender but physical player, can probably play a slot role. So you have your outside guy in Arnold, a more of a slot guy that could also play outside in Rakestraw as a key reserve cornerback. So love those fits there. It's a really good draft. I go B+ with it just because, when you compare the Lions and the Bears, for example, the Bears might got a franchise quarterback, a number one wide receiver, franchise left tackle, a starting corner and some, good reserves is awesome. But I'm going to go B+ on this one for the Lions. And I like being aggressive when you are a good team. Go get a starting corner. Move up 5 spots like they did and get Terry and Arnold. So love that move in round 1.
100%. So I really don't have a lot of complaints. There's some nice developmental players, particularly the offensive linemen, that don't have to play right now. When you're a good team and you have one big problem, go solve it and try to win the whole thing.
Next up, the Green Bay Packers, who drafted almost as many players as the Lions and the Chicago Bears combined, started with Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona at pick number 25. The big question for him, is he a guard or a tackle? The fact that he's drafted at 25 and the fact that they told us afterwards that they're going to play him at tackle tells us that they thought he was a tackle. I have some questions there, which is why this grade's not going to be maybe as high, even though I like a lot more of what they did after that in this draft. Edgerrin Cooper, maybe the best linebacker in this class in the second round out of Texas A&M, signaling maybe they don't love a former first rounder in Quay Walker all that much, maybe in Green Bay. Round 2, they come back again with their second rounder with Javon Bullard. Really smart. I think can play right away. Love this pick. I think he's a starter all day in the NFL. Safety out of Georgia. Marshawn Lloyd, running back out of USC in round 3. Tyron Hopper, Missouri linebacker, again, another linebacker for this team in round 3. Evan Williams, Oregon safety. So doubling up on linebackers, doubling up on safeties, doubling up on offensive tackles. Travis Glover, a 6th rounder out of Georgia State, developmental offensive tackle. I skipped some guys here. Jacob Monk, center out of Duke in round 5. Keaton Oladapo, safety out of Oregon State, the 3rd safety in this class. I forgot one of them in the 5th round. And then 2 more picks in the 7th round. They got Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane, to back up Jordan Love. Love that selection. And then Kalen King, a Penn State cornerback who was thought of as a future very high draft pick and didn't have a great season, didn't work out all that amazing. Can give you some special teams ability as well in round 7. So a huge draft class for the Green Bay Packers. I like some of the aspects of it. I don't love it. And it starts with the first rounder. I think they got a lot of contributors. If they really hit a home run on those second rounders and got starters at linebacker and safety, and Morgan truly ends up being a left tackle in the NFL, then it's a much better draft than the C+ grade I'm going to give them.
Interesting draft. I mean, again, a lot of people, a lot of bodies. They added 11 guys. And King in the 7th round, great. All this talk about him being a first rounder this time last year. Sure, I'll throw a 7th rounder at you. I thought Pratt would go in like the 4th, so maybe he's a long-term backup. 3 offensive linemen. Glover's the guy that actually visited the Steelers, so I went and looked at him. I think he's a great developmental player in the 6th round. That might even be my favorite pick. My least favorite pick is probably Jordan Morgan at 25 overall, but this team is great at making linemen hit. Who I don't know who their O-line coach has been over the years, but he does a heck of a job. I think Lloyd will be ahead of A.J. Dillon before you know it, and maybe the starter next year. Jacobs is basically a 1-year deal. But what I wanted to harp on here, And I know that it'll have some special teams ramifications, and special teams have been a big problem for Green Bay over the last few years. But they drafted, not only did they sign McKinney, they drafted 3 more safeties and 2 linebackers. I mean, you talk about middle of the field defensive reinforcements. They drafted 5 guys that basically play between the passes on defense, 3 safeties after giving McKinney big money. I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's pretty telling.
This is a Goody thing, right? This is what the Green Bay Packers have done in recent years. And I really like the strategy. Brian Gutekunst, his drafts, they have a need. Wide receiver, they draft 2. They draft 3. They draft 2 more the next year, right? And they've got
same with O-line, 3 O-line
now, right? They drafted 3 safeties in this class. They signed 1 in free agency. They attack the heck out of needs, and special teams might be a little bit more important now than past seasons, and they've been bad at it too, with the new return rule. So that'll be interesting. And obviously they needed help on the offensive line. That was number 1. And they got a really safe player in Jordan Morgan, who, even if he's not a tackle, is probably going to be a pretty good guard for a long time, center, whatever it is. Yeah. And then they went with the upside and sort of a developmental guy in Glover a little bit later. And I love the way that they do that. And they always have a lot of picks, so it allows them to throw extra, players at it. And they Dontavian Wicks might be their best wide receiver, and he was the second wide receiver taken last year after Jaden Reed. They had Dubs and Christian Watson the year before in 2022 and remade their entire room in 2 drafts, doubling up. And so I love that from Brian Gutekunst, and I think he's an underrated GM, and he's put together a really good team. And, the biggest key there was Jordan Love developing into what looks like a starting quarterback, even though it's only for half a season. So as Love goes and as Love develops is where this franchise is going to go.
I had a lot of doubts about Love, and I don't anymore. I think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback pretty much from here on out. So fun young team, of course, all the skill guys from last year. I think they're a real contender, and I expect they step forward from the Packers overall this year.
What was your letter grade?
I'm going to give him a B. I know B's are boring, but I'm still giving him a B.
Next, the Minnesota Vikings. They got their guy, I think, at quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, even though he's the 5th quarterback in the top 10 of this draft, and then came back with a trade at the in the middle of round 1, and a lot more from that Minnesota Vikings draft grade next. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Why Game Time? Well, killer last-minute deals. On the Game Time app, you can get tickets to any sporting event, not just NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball, NFL tickets when the season starts up. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and not just sports either. We're talking comedy shows, theater events near you, and of course your favorite concerts when your favorite artist comes through town. Go to Game Time to get those tickets as well. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, last team here in the NFC North, and it was a really interesting draft for all of these teams, and potentially franchise changing for both the Bears and the Vikings. And the Vikings obviously lost Kirk Cousins in free agency and probably drafted the most Kirk Cousins-y quarterback in this class, right? In J.J. McCarthy. And they didn't have to trade super high up to do it. They moved up 1 spot with the Jets from 11 to 10 to draft quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Now, the reports are, and I don't know, what to believe, what's real, if it was really close between McCarthy and Drake May, but apparently they tried really hard to trade up for Drake May, and it wasn't to be. So they might have settled maybe for their next best quarterback in this class. But they got a guy, right? And so now they got a young quarterback. Sam Darnold might be the interim. We'll see how long that lasts. And I think this is where, if you're grading the Minnesota Vikings draft, I think that pick is fine, and people are okay with that pick. Some people love J.J. McCarthy. Some people maybe not as hot. But if you're the Vikings, where they were, getting him at 10 or 11 was was a pretty good move, I think, on most
Mhm.
people's scorecards. Dallas Turner, did you hit on a franchise quarterback and go get a dynamic edge rusher at 17, going up from 23 to 17, and it costing less than it would have cost you if you moved up further for a quarterback? That's kind of the lens to look at this draft through. And when I look at it, and I think this is probably part of the conversation they had in the draft room, Matt, is, okay, we were willing to give up A, B, C to go get one player at quarterback, and that might have still been just J.J. McCarthy. But now we were able to give up just A, B, and C, and not have to give up D also. And we got not only J.J. McCarthy, but we got our best defensive player in the entire draft in Dallas Turner out of Alabama at pick number 17. What are your thoughts on the first round before we get to the rest of it?
I'm going to answer this with the rest of it, not just the first round. Well, I'll start with the first round.
Okay.
I love, and this is a love-hate draft for me. I love that they got a potential franchise quarterback without having to sacrifice other first-round picks, including next year's or the one they got from Houston. So that in itself, I love. I don't love the prospect, though. I was never a huge J.J. McCarthy believer. I don't think he's a super high ceiling. So that part is okay. You know, I do think they probably preferred May, and I think most people would. What I hate, though, about this draft is no second rounders, no third rounders, no fifth rounders, and only a fourth rounder at Kyrie Jackson with your middle meat and potatoes of the draft. And making that worse as it stands right now, and they should get a comp pick for Kirk Cousins. They have a first round pick and 2 fifth round picks next year. And that's it. They have 3 draft picks next year, none in the second, third, or fourth round. I just think if you go 2 years in a row with no meat and potatoes in your draft, no second, thirds, mid-round picks, your roster is going to suffer dramatically. It might be 2 years till we see it, but I just think that second round plug and play guard is off the table 2 years in a row. You know, I hate that part.
Yeah, and it was a double trade up to get Dallas Turner.
Yeah, right.
They had already given up the pick to go up to 23. And so it does get pretty pricey when you start to factor in the total cost of just that one player, even if they had already kind of factored in those costs. And if you asked them a month ago, you said, hey, okay, for this package, you can have J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. They would have said, oh, hell yeah, we'll take that. And I think that's probably what talked them into making those moves.
I'm sure they had a very high grade on Turner. Which
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or else they wouldn't have moved up for him.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So they're telling us that. And if they're right, then this is going to be a great draft class. And who cares what you spent to get them. But there's some potential downside to this as well. Why it ends up being a B class for me overall. We'll get to the later picks here in one more second. I do want to say though that when it comes to this draft class and when it comes to the next year's draft, that's where it could start to hurt, and you have to factor that in a little bit here. And I'm sure it'll hurt their draft grade next year as well, because we'll talk about how you only had this many picks, and but the Kirk Cousins comp pick that's probably to come as well is going to be a third rounder. So at least you have that, but that'll be outside the top 100 probably, right around pick 100. So it's not like you're getting a slam dunk starter there, even with that comp pick factored in next year, which is, I'm sure, part of it was like, we're going to have a third, so we'll play with another one of these. But yeah, so day 2 selections is the bulk of your roster, and they have none in 2 years.
Right. And they didn't have a second rounder last year, I just noticed too. So, I mean, those are valuable picks, those day 2 picks. And to go basically 3 years with very little on day 2, I think is going to have long-term ramifications. That makes that's when you start overpaying in free agency, because, you know, I can't draft a tackle to develop or whatever, you know?
Yeah. They're getting their books right though. So they might have money, and that might have been another factor. It's like, well, our cap situation is going to be a lot better now with a cheap quarterback and not paying Danielle Hunter in 2025, 2026.
And Jefferson will get a big contract, as he should, but I mean, that's feasible, you know.
Kyrie Jackson, corner out of Oregon, long athletic corner out of Oregon in round 4. Walter Rouse, Oklahoma offensive tackle in round 6. Will Reichard, Alabama kicker in round 6. Michael Juergens, center from Wake Forest in round 7. And Levi Drake Rodriguez, Texas A&M Commerce defensive tackle in round 7. Matt, what was the Texas A&M Commerce tape look like for Levi Drake Rodriguez?
I was going to say that of these late round picks, 2 6s and 2 7s, I like Rouse. I think Rouse could stick, and they definitely need a guard. I'm guessing he competes for the guard spots right off the bat, but I'm not seeing much in those last 3 picks here. I mean, maybe a kicker is just like our punter conversation, and he lasts for, years and years and years. But I mean, this is a small thing, but I would have a hard time if I played in either North division drafting a kicker from the South. I mean, like, he's got to go to Chicago and Green Bay and make kicks. Has he ever done that at Bama? Of course not, So,
right.
And I know nothing about Juergens or Drake Rodriguez, and I not have high hopes for either.
And if he's a good kicker and he sticks, like drafting a kicker, period, like they don't last on their team that drafted them into their second contract very often, which is why you wait on those types of players. But I mean, late 6th round, the 27th pick in round 6, that's where you draft a kicker. So we'll see if he turns out for them. So that's a fine pick for me. I don't know anything about Levi Drake Rodriguez. It's a B class for me. And obviously a lot hinges on those 2 first rounders. And if you hit on those, you're cool with the rest of it. And I gave it a B. The way I look at this is, did the other 3 teams in the North look at the Vikings draft and go, oh, bleep, we're going to be in trouble? Because I think some teams probably looked at the Bears and said, oh, bleep, the Bears might actually be really good here pretty soon. I don't know if you say that necessarily, just at first blush looking at the Vikings, and it could actually be that, like, oh, no, man, they got a guy in J.J. McCarthy, and this Dallas Turner is a freak coming off the edge, and we're kind of screwed. But it doesn't make you It doesn't make your knees rattle together, I don't think, which is why I gave it a B, and the depth that they're going to lose with those day 2 picks.
I'm giving it a C because I really dislike not having anything from day 2 for 2+ years. And more I think of it, I don't think this team's bad, but I think I'd rather be the GM or in charge of the other 3 teams we talked about right now than Minnesota.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
That is the NFC North draft grades. Let us know, where do you agree, where do you disagree? At BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a comment on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. And of course, you can subscribe on any of your podcast platforms that you are currently listening to this episode. Matt and I back tomorrow, staying in the North, going to the AFC side. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.